Hey everyone, it's Kelsey. This is Essentially Book. Thank you for stopping by my channel today. I wanted to talk about my 5-star reads that I've read so far this year. I got the idea from Krista at Books and Jams, and I know it's more than halfway through the year, but I think it is a good thing for me to do right now because I have stopped making TBRs and I'm just testing it out for the summer to see kind of what my reading looks like. And I don't feel like I've been reading very well, if that makes sense. So when I don't read with intention and mood read, I find myself reading more romance. Not that that's bad, but I just don't feel like I'm reading the best books right now. So I wouldn't say I'm in a slump. I wouldn't say I'm not reading. I don't know. There's just something off right now. So I wanted to look at the books I've given 5 stars to kind of see if that helps me pick books more as I'm reading through the remainder of the year, knowing that I still have some videos I want to film. I have some reading challenges I'm trying to do, all that stuff. But I just thought this would be really helpful to kind of assess my reading and what has been successful for me this year. And I kind of liked doing it. I made a list, all of that, and broke them down by genre. And so we'll kind of go through them and we'll just see where this video takes me. Okay, so like I said, it's almost the end of July. I have read 14 5-star reads out of 76 books so far. So that's 18% of my books have been 5-star reads. That is broken down through a few genres. So nonfiction, general fiction, historical fiction, mystery, romance, and fantasy. And there's one book on this list I think I'm dropping to a 4-star, but we'll get to it when we get to it. So I don't consider myself a nonfiction reader, and I think I have a very specific type of nonfiction I like generally. And this year, the books I've read for nonfiction, with the exception of one, kind of fit what I know I like. So the very first nonfiction book I gave 5 stars was The Making of Biblical Womenhood. It's a nonfiction book about complementarianism and how that is not biblical, and how people who believe in complementarianism have misread the gospel, and it looks through the lens of history. So Beth Allison Barr is an author and she's a historian, which is my favorite thing because I'm also a historian. And so she does a really nice job of she's a Christian, she's a Baptist, she's a preacher's wife. She uses her background in growing up and how the church has treated her and some of the personal experiences she had, and then she researched using her historical background what the context and culture at the time of the writing of the Bible was, and how complementarianism isn't biblical. And it is just a really well done book, well researched, backed with scripture. And I really liked it. It like spoke right to me because we came from a complementarian church that just didn't jive with us for a lot of reasons. But it's just really well done from like both the historical and biblical perspective. And so I really liked that. That's just something that is very niche for me. The other thing that I like, so I gave The Stranger in the Woods 5 stars too, which is narrative nonfiction. And I love narrative nonfiction. And this one, it just was unputdownable. It didn't feel like you were reading nonfiction. This is about the last true American hermit. And it was just fun. And I like narrative nonfiction. Screaming on the Inside also makes sense why I gave it 5 stars. This is a pretty short book. I listened to it on audio while we were staining our deck, and it is about the unsustainability of American motherhood, and it kind of looks at motherhood and how it crumbled during the pandemic and how the structures that were there to support us don't exist, which I was with some friends last night. We were talking about this, and it just really resonates deeply because I think a lot of mothers and parents and caregivers felt not cared for through the pandemic. And this book just does a really nice job of not boring you with facts and statistics, but showing how American culture isn't designed. It's designed for capitalism and not for anything else, and like doesn't really slow down or taking into consideration that like the workforce has children and like how we balance all of that. I really, really liked it. I thought I got a lot of little good nuggets from it, and it just wasn't boring. It was done in a way that I wanted to keep listening, that I really resonated with. I'm not a big parenting book person, but I like this, where it's more of a sociological look at something, less of a personal development, because that's just not my jam. I can definitely tell you that, like, would not give those 5-star reads, probably. And then the final nonfiction book I gave 5 stars to was These Precious Days by Ann Patchett, and that is a book of essays, which is new to me. I didn't really ever think I'd like essays, and I do know that I like nonfiction essays over fiction essays. This is Anne's essay collection during kind of the pandemic and when the world shut down. And I'm not sure how I would feel about pandemic novels. And this one is just really well done because like she talks about when Tom Hanks got COVID and how the entire world, we were like, oh no, don't do this to Tom Hanks. There's just so many little things in this book that I resonated with, and her writing is so good, and just her voice, she's funny. There was so much in this beautiful book that it deserves 5 stars. And so I will say that because of that essay book, this was the essay book that convinced me to give essays more of a shot. So I'm excited to kind of see if I still like more of these personal memoir essays. And I would like to read more of those in the upcoming years to come. I don't know if I will do that this year. That is a micro genre I would like to focus on. Okay, and then for general fiction, I gave Carrie Soto Is Back, Mema, Ask Again Yes, and The Heart's Invisible Furies 5 stars. And in my 5-star prediction video, I talked a lot about The Heart's Invisible Furies, but something that really resonates with me, another micro genre, is I love families behaving badly or messy families. So Ask Again Yes really fits into that vein because it's two families that kind of are drawn together by tragedy and then how it pans out. Heart's Invisible Furies is more like a messy person, but not really. I would say it's more of like a family history, which I really love. I just adored that novel. Mema is about a woman whose world is falling apart, and it deals with depression and like finding yourself and women's sexuality. And again, it's a messy person trying to make her way in the world, and I like that. I love messy things. Finally, Carrie Soto Is Back. I was very skeptical about this one, and I was kind of disappointed when Taylor Jenkins Reid announced that her next book was going to be a tennis story, because I was like, ugh, like I don't care about that. I'm not really into sports stuff. Oh my goodness, it was so good. And if you do have the opportunity, listen to it on audio because it is a full audio cast. And when they're doing like news stories announcing Carrie Soto's comeback, it's like this really fun. There's music. It really plays into like that newscast, BBC stuff. It was just really fun. And she just writes characters with such depth, but the books are very propulsive. And there's some crossover characters from prior books, which she's known to do. And I just really enjoyed that. And that was probably the book that I was the least excited for. And then it ended up being a 5-star read. And I think that says something, right? Okay, and then for historical fiction, which I used to read a ton of historical fiction, and I have not been reading a lot of historical fiction of late, which is just weird for me. I don't know. I have 4 Treasures of the Sky and Take My Hand. So 4 Treasures of the Sky is the most depressing book I've ever read. It's extremely dark. There's no hope in it. It ends, poor person had like such a miserable existence, but it is a very educational book on the Chinese Exclusion Act and like how the Chinese were treated. And I thought it was really relevant to Americans to like pay attention to see how like all these Asian hate crimes are happening, like just to get a better understanding of their place in society and like how they've come here and just the horrible atrocities to even establish themselves in the United States. But it's so good. It's heavy, it's dark, there's so many triggers, but it's just one of those books that like you know as you're reading it, it's an important book, and there's so many scenes that stick with me and will stick with me for a really long time. And I think the best historical fiction is that like uses fiction and fictional stories as a way to memorialize things that happen and bring it more to the general public. Like I can read dry historical text all day, like that's something I enjoy, but a lot of people don't. And I love good historical fiction that can like bring those things to the forefront and make it just known, but not heavy to consume, even though this book is very heavy. I just think this book does a really nice job of taking some really awful things and humanizing them and explaining them. It's really great. And then the other one is Take My Hand, which is again about things that we need to talk about more, but this is about the forced sterilization of Black women in the 50s and 60s. And how it affects this lady who helped perpetuate it but didn't know the implications and kind of was in a hard position, and then she fights that and takes it to the Supreme Court. And it's based on a true story, but it's fictionalized. I think it's also really relevant, like with the overturning of Roe v. Wade and some of the things that we do to women in this country. So loved that as well. I am trying to avoid World War II historical fiction as much as possible because I've just read so much of it, and I think that is a good tip if maybe you don't like historical fiction or think you don't, maybe don't read historical fiction that is set in World War II because it seems very populated, unless it's Kristen Hanna's The Nightingale, and then I would say read that. But in general, I think there's just so many other stories that can be told right now, and I'm very appreciative of non-World War II historical fiction. Okay, the book that I think I'm gonna drop down to 4 stars because it has not stood the test of time is The Golden Spoon, which I had a ton of fun with that. It's a mystery. I really did like reading it. It's like if Great British Baking was set in America and had like Agatha Christie murder happen. And it was really fun and really good, but I'm not thinking about it in the way that I would. So I do think I'm officially dropping that down to a 4 star. It was just propulsive. I couldn't put it down at the time. It found me at the perfect time, which is why I think I gave it a 5 stars. But 5-star reads for me they should stand the test of time, and I want to recommend to people, or we'll talk about them for a really long time, and this just isn't that. I have 3 more books. So I've given for romance The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren 5 stars, and if I could love a book as much as I loved this book, it was so fun and like the perfect summer reading with like great characters. One is a cinnamon roll, one is hilarious, and the vibes, like I felt so good reading this, and it made me so happy, and it was so fun, and I think that is like the making of a good summer romance, is just unputdownable, fun, lighthearted. I don't even have a lot to say that's like substantial. I just really loved it. Okay. Water break. Okay. Finally, the last 2 books I gave 5 stars to are fantasy, and the fantasy books that I love tend to have really strong characters, and I think they just have to have more of that character focus, less of the plot. So the first one is The House in the Cerulean Sea. My 5-star prediction video, I talk about it more, but good Lord, are these characters not the most perfect, endearing, wonderful beings in the world? Like, I want everyone to read this book. It's so good. Queer representation, kids that just warm your heart, and like even from like an adoption standpoint, for me, I think there was just some good commentary on like people's perceptions of stuff and just how sometimes we perpetuate things because it's comfortable and not necessarily the right thing to do. So I really, really love The House in the Cerulean Sea, and I'm mad it took me this long to read. And then finally, the 5-star read that was a reread is The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien. And yeah, like we listened to it on audio, and it was narrated by Andy Serkis, and he is the guy who plays Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies. He's phenomenal. He does all the voices, sings all the songs. It's a really great experience on audio if that's something you're looking for. But this book is just a classic, and it stands the test of time. I think if you are overwhelmed by the whole Lord of the Rings series, start with The Hobbit because it's more adventure. I think it's easier to get into. It's less high fantasy and it's more adventure, fun characters. There's very quick plot. And it gives you a nice intro into the world. And then if you like that, you can dive deeper into Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, Silmarillion, all that stuff. But it's just lovely on audio. So I'm really glad that's how we chose to consume it this round. It was fantastic. We're now listening to the Lord of the Rings on audio because it's also narrated by Andy Serkis. So those are my 5-star reads that I've read so far this year, 14 of 76. I'm happy with that, but I think I'm gonna be reading a lot more books of substance in the next few months, just based on some of the things that I know I have coming up for book clubs and videos. And so I'm kind of excited to see, I'm gonna save this list and kind of compare it towards at the end of the year and see what I am drawn to and see if there's any micro genres that emerge that maybe I didn't think of. But I hope this was helpful, and maybe this gives you an idea of like the type of reader I am, and maybe we're book twins. That's always fun to hear too. I like watching people's like 5-star book wrap-ups because I just think it's fun to see what people value. Okay, so there it is. Those are all my 5-star reads. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, I will see you later. Bye.